Hello. Exactly 1518. The story here takes place in winter of 1943. A squad of U.S. soldiers stationed at a remote outpost in Wind Ridge, Oregon, comes face to face with a legendary creature, beyond explanation. It began as a routine single court mission turned into a horror story. So, join me as we go through this encounter together. And remember, if you hear something go bump in the night, don't go investigating. Enjoy.
Folks later said it was bears, but I know better. I heard it. I saw what it did. 6 of us went up that hill. Not all came back. This is what happened before the forest took my friends. So before we continue, please make sure to like and subscribe to support the channel, and comment down below where you're watching from. Thanks. January of 1943, Willamette Ridge, Oregon. There was a logging route that cut along the ribs of the hills. There was a rail spur down in a notch, feeding the war like a vein. Our little outpost watched that ground. Not glamour. No flags, just a tent city of canvas and bad coffee perched on a damp shoulder of pine and rock. It smelled like wet wool, wood smoke, and grease. Boots never dried. Morning started before dawn because mornings had no mercy. We had a potbelly stove in the shack and a stove in the big tent. Both sulked more than warmed. Sergeant Thomas Hale ran us. Mid-30s, steady, eyes that didn't blink unless he meant to. He had that rationed warmth, like a man who had saved half a smile for later and then lost the receipt. He wasn't cruel, didn't need to be. He would say, do the job, then do it again. We did. Corporal Mac McKenna. Boston boy, sharp tongue, quick grin. The kind of mouth that kept your spirits up and got you socked in the jaw the same night. Mac would call the rain God spit and call the radio that cranky bastard box, and he loved both like family. Private Donald Reyes, humor like a cigarette spark. He saw fear and shot it with a joke, but his hands gave him away when the weather came in. Always a little tremble, like a leaf. He was a good shot. He could drop a can off a fence with iron sights and wind. He whistled when bored. It annoyed me. I miss it now. Technician, 5th class, Weller. Radio man. Precise. Liked things square and grounded and written down. Carried a little St. Metal on his dog tag chain and didn't mind you seeing it. Called storms by names like front and system and then knocked on wood after. I ran wire with him. I learned the radio guts from him. He taught me to listen through the static. Private 1st class Sanders. The youngest. Still had that eager shine. Wanted to be harder than he was. Wanted to prove he belonged. He had quick feet, quick eyes, and not much behind the eyes yet. Not dumb. Just green. The forest ate green. Me, Private Owen Lee. Farm kid from east of nowhere. I could fix fence, stitch a tier, and read a storm line. I could listen. In Signal Corps that counted, our job was simple. Guard the outpost. Watch the trail, keep the rail corridor open, report anything odd. We checked our wire runs along the logging line. We kept the gasoline drum for the generator under a tarp and tied it down like it was gold. We swept the ridge trail after a wind for broken limbs so the little liaison truck could get up when it came. We filled sandbags where the ground slumped. We ran patrols a mile out each way. We watched and listened and wrote things down. It was cold. The kind of cold that makes your teeth feel like metal. We wore wool and more wool, and still the wet got in. The fog came sliding between the trees like something alive. It took your breath and your bearings. You could hear a branch crack a mile away and not see your own boots. The rain would come and go, then freeze, then melt, then come again. Monotony was the word. Same checks, same jokes, same burned coffee. Hale cooked the way he did everything. Efficient, mean. He could make eggs into salt. We ate because a body has to. We cleaned our rifles every evening because Hale said a clean rifle is a kind rifle, and we wanted a kind rifle. The morning had started strange. It was still black out. The stove was fuming and the tent smelled like wet wool socks trying to die. Sanders stepped out to take a piss and came back with his helmet crooked and his face tight. "Sergeant," he said, "it's wrongly quiet." Hale didn't look up from the ledger. "Use your words," he said. "I am," Sanders said. "It's quiet wrong. No birds." No breeze, just the drips. Like the woods are holding their breath. Reyes snorted. Maybe the woods don't want to hear you piss. Mac tossed him a shove. Ease off. Weller stopped winding the radio cord. He listened, head cocked. Even he went still. Hale set the pencil down and finally listened too. The stove ticked. You could hear the pine needles drip. That was it. No woodpecker. No jay. No squirrel chatter. Just the unknowable spaces between drops. Hale nodded once. Noted, he said. We start with the line south. Mac, Lee, you run with me. Reyes, Sanders, you check the trail east. Weller, give me a good weather read and a clean battery swap. We went out into fog that chewed the world down to 30 yards. Boot prints filled with water as you watched. The outpost sat on a little bench above the switchback. The ridge fell away to a creek. Trees leaned in over the trail like people with a secret. We did our checks. We found a branch across the path and dragged it aside. We put cold hands on cold wire and told each other jokes we'd told before. It stayed quiet wrong until the sun came, and then it was just the usual wet and noise. We were soldiers. We had a job. We had no time for forest moods. That is what we told ourselves. That is what we told Sanders. He nodded like he believed it. He did not. It was that night. We stacked a supply crate by the big tent flap. Rations mostly, cans with dull labels, coffee as black as guilt, a few signal flares in a side box. We did the night routine. Rotations on watch. One man on the perimeter at all times, two if the fog came thick. I took second watch with Mac. We stood near the lantern, watching dark. Lantern light makes shadows act up. Every stump looks like a man crouched down. Every bush looks like it breathes. You learn to ignore it. You look for what does not fit. Sometime after midnight, there came a sound you could feel in your teeth. Not a footstep, not a branch fall. A kind of slow exhale from the trees. Heavy, like a horse right outside the pool of light. We froze. The hair on my neck stood up like it had orders. Mac lifted the beam and shot it fast across the tree line. The sound stopped. Just the fog again and the drip drip. Bear, Mac said after a bit. Big bastard, smells our beans. You smell like beans, I told him. It was supposed to be a joke. It didn't land. We finished our watch. Weller and Reyes came on. Reyes muttered about the breathing too. Weller said he heard it, but he also said he hears dead air on the radio and thinks it is a song. We were hardly convinced. Dawn made the canvas go from black to gray to empty. We shook out of our bags and went to break down the watch stove. The crate by the flap looked wrong. Boards splintered outward, nails bent like pretzels. The canvas tie had been yanked and lay in the mud like a vein pulled from a body. Hell, Hale said. He stepped close. What did this? Reyes stuck his head in the broken box. Not a knife, not meat, not neat. Look, the edges were torn, not cut. The wood was ragged and crunched like a mouth had pulled it apart. Cans were gone. A few lay in the mud with teeth marks. Not teeth like a dog, too far apart, too deep. We circled like dogs ourselves. Mud prints mucked up the ground. I knelt and put my palm in one. My fingers didn't reach the sides. It was wide. It was deep. Not boot treads. Not any shoe I knew. Toes like little lobes. The heel sunk down hard, like something heavy had leaned into it. Weller stood back, arms folded tight. That's wrong, he said. Mac looked at me and lifted his eyebrows. Bear, he said again, this time with less salt. Bear's got boots now, Reyes said, trying for humor and missing. Perimeter check, Hale said. Calm. He did not raise his voice. He never had to. Standard. Mac lead down to the creek. Reyes, Weller across the upper trail. Sanders, you stick with me. Let's not make a story out of a mess. Move. We moved. We found nothing. The prints drifted into the trees and lost their shape where the needles made a carpet. No tracks with claws. No scat. No marks on trunks. The fog stayed. The silence lifted some with the day. A jay yelled at us like it wanted rent. We chalked it up to an animal. We knew the word we were not saying. We did not say it. It would have sounded like campfire talk even then. Night came, we set watches, and the woods did their best to be normal, but I still heard that slow branch cracking now and then. It wasn't random. It had a rhythm, like a man working a knot in his shoulder. Every time I turned my flashlight, it stopped. Every time I raised my rifle, the dark seemed to lean away. We ended the shift with a bad joke about bears stealing the coffee. We laughed because that is what you do when something watches and won't show its face. We went to our bags and pretended sleep came easy. You can get used to almost anything. Men on ships get used to the sea. Men in mud get used to the mud. Men in fog get used to living inside a throat. We went back to it. Repair fence. Clean rifles. Burn trash. Same old. The little truck grumbled up the switchback one afternoon, dropped a crate of bread that tasted like damp newspaper, and 2 sacks of beans. The driver told Reyes a joke about lumberjacks and drove off before the punchline landed. Hale made us log the missing rations as animal interference. He kept the report neat, because neat is half of truth. Weller checked the radio and wiped each contact like it was silver. He said the weather was going to turn. He didn't know how soon. He looked at the sky like it owed him the answer. Mac used the downtime to ride Weller about his forest ghosts. He called him Father Weller. He crossed himself every time the radio hissed. Weller took it and gave it back. He called Mac Mayor of Nonsense. It was the kind of back and forth that keeps a squad alive because it keeps the dark at bay. Even Sanders grinned at that. He was not grinning much now. He kept glancing at the trees and he jumped when the stove popped. Reyes took a rifle down along the creek to see if he could scare up a rabbit. He came back empty. He said, even the forest's gone shy. He meant it. One clear night wandered in by mistake. The fog pulled back just enough that we could see a bite of stars. We broke out the cards and played poker by lantern light. We told the same stories and pretended to laugh like they were new. For an hour, we were boys again and not wet soldiers guarding a logging road no one cared about. Come morning, Hale walked the latrine line the way he always did because he was that kind of man. He called out, "This is wrong." We went and looked. The trench had been messed with. Not a stray boot, not us. Something had dug at the edge, like a child with a stick, like a dog testing a fence line. There were marks like fists had gone in and scooped and then stopped. No one said bear. Hale made a tight note in the ledger. He didn't say anything at all. That told me more than words. Things didn't blow up. They tightened, day by day, like a belt notch you do not remember pulling. We woke up every morning to prints closer to our tents. Not 1 set, 2, maybe 3. We argued about that. It is hard to tell in mud. But they had weight. They pressed deep like a foot belongs to a thing that will not be pushed aside. At night, stones came. Not a hail. Not random. Bursts. 3, then 5, then nothing for a long while. Reyes counted them out under his breath and tried to make a joke of it. We got a fan, he said once, and even he could not make it sell. The stones were not small. You could feel them hit the crates. You could hear the thud travel through the wood like a knock at your own door. Mac walked out into the dark once, drunk on his own nerve, and said, "You throw, I throw." He tossed one back and it disappeared like it never had been. He came back pale and called himself a fool before any of us could. We found a deer one afternoon, or what was left of one, hanging in a fur 30 feet off the ground like a butcher's sign. Gutted clean but messy at the same time, if that makes sense. No rope, no snare. The belly opened and the insides gone, and no drag marks in the mud below. We stood under it and felt small. It is a man, Weller said flat. Men do that. Men can be rotten. You want to see boot prints then, Mac said. He was angry at the air. Angry because fear makes men mean. Where are the boots? Reyes spit and missed his shoe. It's a bear that went to church, he said. Ties knots, says Grace, climbs trees like a priest. We were snapping at each other now. It got worse when the sun went. One night on watch, Reyes and Weller heard that breathing again. Not a wind. Not a branch. A presence. Slow. Steady, like a thing with lungs as big as the stove. Weller's hand shook. Reyes lifted the rifle and fired a warning shot high. It cracked the trees and made the fog jump. Silence then. A silence so hard it had edges. Then, far off, a long, low roar rolled. Not a cat. Not a bear I'd ever heard. It went up at the end like it knew our names and was saying them wrong. We started to break, not dramatic, just in little ways. Sanders pushed his plate away at dinner. He would not do night watch unless the sergeant stood next to him, and even then his eyes were wrong, big and shiny and full of the trees. "They watches us," he said one morning, voice shot to hell. "Like a man looks at chickens. Like it's counting." Hale put a hand on his shoulder and squeezed. Hale's hands were warm even when the world wasn't. "We stay on schedule," he said. "We do not waste bullets. We do not spook each other." Mac pulled Hale aside and hissed, "We need to hike down. Report this. Get a squad with more guns. Get a truck. Anything." Hale didn't like a lot of talk. He listened. He weighed. "We are a post," he said. "We do not abandon a rail line because the woods made a noise. I will radio in. If command says pull back, we pull. Until then, we are it." He tried to call. He set the antenna proper and switched out the battery and smacked the case like men do when they want metal to behave. The weather had come on mean. Static swallowed the words. His voice went out and stopped in the air like the fog ate it. He got enough through to make a report. Then the front rolled in heavy and the hiss took everything. We put up flares, lines, and trip lines like we were in a book. We doubled guards. We stacked the extra crates as a wall. We kept the lanterns low and used our ears more than light. We tightened formation on patrol like we were a single animal. We moved slower. We breathed more quiet. Fear can be organized. A thing that watches can learn from that. It did. On the third day, we found the helmet, half buried near the old spur trail that the loggers had used before the winter shut them down. I saw the edge in the mud and scuffed it with my boot. The metal came up tilted and cold as a fish. It had a name scratched under the brim, not a man we knew. A logger who had gone missing months back. I remembered hearing it from the truck driver. Thought it was a bar fight or a ditch dive. The helmet said otherwise. It had scuffs like it had been dragged. It sat there like a headstone. Sanders would not touch it. He made the sign of the cross with his eyes closed like a boy. Weller wrote the name down in his little book and shut the book hard. Like closing it would close the day. Nights were not nights anymore. They were a span you had to cross in one piece. The stones kept at it. The breathing came and went thick as the fog. Once I heard steps that didn't sound like steps. A weight moving from tree to tree, light and heavy at the same time. If you have ever heard a big man try to be quiet, you know the sound. Not soft, careful. That is worse. That means it knows you. Reyes took a joke too far one evening. He hung a can of beans from a string near the cook fire and sat on a crate like a fisherman watching his bobber. "Come on then," he said. "Big boy, come take your supper." He had a grin like it was all a show. The string moved. Not much. Like something near it breathed. Reyes went quiet. He cut the string and the can fell and he put it back in the crate himself. He didn't say another word before sleep. Hale tried the radio again that night. He got a click back from somewhere. A lieutenant at the district office, maybe. A butter bar with a dry voice. Orders halfway through, then the weather slammed down and ran us off the air. I saw Hale rub his eyes hard with thumb and finger. First time I saw him look tired in the face. It scared me more than the stones. We made a plan you could put on paper. Flares first, warnings before shots. No running alone. If flares fail, fall back to the cabin. The cabin was an old survey hut back of the tents, up against the rock face, tight. One door, a window small enough that a man would have to crawl. We stacked wood inside. We checked the hinges. We felt better because a plan feels like a wall. It is not. The next day the prints came right up to the tent line, fresh, larger than before. Or I only saw them that way. No, larger. I put my hand down again and it could have swallowed my whole arm. The toes bit in. The heel sank. It stood there and looked at the cook fire. You could tell from the way the ground wore. It had been there a while, quiet, while we slept 10 feet away. Mac took off his cap and scratched his head and swore soft. "It is counting us," he said. Same as Sand said. He called him Sand now, like he had grown up overnight. Maybe he had. We were not soldiers then. Not the way the manuals like. We were men trying to sit still while something got closer and tried us for size. We did what men do. We pretended not to see and waited for the next thing. Then it stopped. 2 days of quiet. Like the forest remembered we were nothing and moved on. The wind came up. The fog thinned. Sunlight broke through clouds in slices and laid across the ground like cloth. Our boots steamed. We took them off and put them on the stove rings and laughed when the leather smoked. Reyes found a dry spot on the bench and leaned back and told a story about a girl in Yakima who had a laugh like a fountain. No one minded that the story needed work. We needed to hear it. Hale smiled the way a man smiles when a weight slips a notch. I will write it up as bear trouble, he said. We will put wire around the rations crates. We will be smarter than a bear, or I'll eat Weller's hat. Weller tapped his St. Metal. I will eat your report if you put my hat in this, Sergeant. It felt almost easy in that thin light. We cooked every last ration that wasn't nailed down because we were not sure when the truck would make the climb again. We dried socks. We sat on crates and smoked the last few cigarettes down to nothing and then smoked the filters because men do what they have to. During cleanup, Max squatted by the tent line, facing the cook fire. He did not speak. He just stared at the ground. Sergeant, he said after a long beat, look here. Prints. Fresh. Newer than the ones we had felt fine about forgetting. Larger. Deeper. Not going across the line. Coming up to it. Stopping. A few steps. Turning toward the fire. Not a path. A visit. It had walked in while the light broke the clouds and we joked and cooked. It had stood behind us. You could see where the toes cupped the mud, the way toes do when a man shifts his weight to watch. No one made a joke then, not even Reyes. The piece snapped in the air like a wire under strain. We put our boots back on. We checked our rifles without being told. We waited for night and hated the light for ending. The storm found us after dark. The sky dropped in one piece. Wind came through the trees like a freight train. Rain hammered the canvas until the tent poles shivered like old bones. The lantern flame bent sideways. The world went down to the 5 feet you were standing in, and then the wind took that too. Sanders had the first watch. He stepped out pale and thin as a blade. He looked at me as he went, not a word. Just that look, like he wanted to hand me something he couldn't carry. He went his rounds. The rain got worse. It sounded like gravel thrown by God. The radio hissed in Weller's corner and gave us nothing but a long, cold line of noise. The stove lid rattled. Hale worked his ledger because a man who keeps his hands busy fools his head some. Then the shouting. Short. One word. A crack that could have been a shot, then nothing. We went out like rope pulled tight. Sanders' post near the outer stake line was empty. No helmet. No man. No man. His rifle lay in the mud a few paces off, not dropped neat but ripped from hands, the strap broken at the buckle. The mud told a short, dumb story. Deep scuffs. Toes dug in. Then wide, sick drag marks that disappeared into the needles where the mud could not remember. Hold, Hale said, his voice the same as always, and I loved him for it then. We make a search, chalk the trees. Keep line of sight, no hero work. We bring him back. We marked trunks with chalk as we moved, bright lines on black wet bark. The fog came between us in sheets like a curtain being pulled and pushed by a drunk stagehand. Something moved to our left. We turned. The movement was already behind us. A snap of a branch over our heads and then distant. It was circling, not running, studying. I could feel it the way you feel when a bull in a pen looks you over to see where to stick the horn. Weller panicked first. He shouted something and fired a burst into a shadow that had already gone. The muzzle flash lit rain like a million little knives. Mac grabbed his barrel and pushed it low. Hold fire, he yelled. You'll hit Lee. Better than what's out there, Weller said, and then choked on his own fear. He knew he was wrong. He knew it and could not stop his hands. We called Sanders' name until the wind blew the sound back in our faces. We heard nothing human answer. We did hear a breath sometimes, or we thought we did. A long pull of air that was not the wind, fast then slow, close then gone. I tried to put a shape to it with my eyes. The shape did not want me to. We dragged ourselves back to camp soaked and shaking. Hale set us in a tight wedge like a